You walked past it this morning, and you didn't notice a thing. The fluorescent lights still hummed. The linoleum floors still gleamed. From the entrance of the aisle, the shelves looked completely full. But they aren't. Right now, beneath the corporate public relations veneer, Walmart has quietly initiated a massive silent purge of its inventory system, pulling the plug on orders for 12 foundational food items that millions of households consider non-negotiable. There was no press release. There was no warning sign posted on the sliding glass doors. No corporate executive stood on a stage to explain why. The only way you will discover this is when you reach out your hand for a product your family has survived on for years, and your fingers meet empty air. The slot where it used to sit is still there. The price tag might even still be stuck to the plastic molding, but behind the scenes, that specific item has been deleted from the automated ordering software. This isn't a temporary out-of-stock glitch. It is a calculated, quiet cancellation. We are witnessing a structural rewriting of the American grocery store. Most shoppers are completely blind to it, operating on the assumption that our supply chains recovered from the shocks of the early 2020s. They haven't. They've just gotten more sophisticated at hiding the cracks. Most people won't wake up to this reality until the price of every remaining item on the shelf starts violently climbing, and the familiar, budget-friendly options vanish entirely. We are dissecting all 12 of these cancelled and heavily compromised foods right now, moving from the stealthiest, most overlooked substitutions to the number one item on the list, a product that dictates the first 10 minutes of your morning routine. Once you see the economic trap closing around this specific morning staple, your entire perspective on food security will shift. Let's look at the mechanism. Number 12. Breakfast cereal. Stand at the end of the aisle and look down. It is a wall of bright engineered colors and nostalgic corporate mascots. Cheerios, Frosted Flakes, Lucky Charms. Visually, the corporate illusion holds perfectly. But the deception isn't happening on the outside of the cardboard box. It is happening within the plastic liner inside. The industry relies on a predatory metric known as shrinkflation. Retail giants and manufacturers maintain a stable price point while systematically draining the actual volume of food delivered. The box maintains its physical height on the shelf, so your eyes don't register the theft. You only notice the anomaly on Thursday night, when a box that historically fed your children for an entire week runs dry 36 hours early. It isn't because your kids are eating larger portions. It's because the corporation is feeding them less per dollar. Simultaneously, the giants are trimming the fat from their portfolios. Varieties that fail to yield maximum margins are being quietly dropped from the global ordering matrix. The unique flavors disappear first. The standard family sizes are scrubbed next. General Mills has openly documented severe margin compression and softening consumer demand. Several niche Cheerios variants have already been quietly executed behind closed boardroom doors. As the cost of agricultural grains, processing sugar, plastic packaging, and diesel transportation converge upward, manufacturers cut the weak links and focus purely on high-margin velocity. A standard box now demands $4 to $6 of your hard-earned capital. The premium or giant sizes easily breach the $8 threshold. The defensive maneuver here is simple. Stop buying into the illusion of variety. Identify the core grains your household actually consumes, track the price per ounce, not the deceptive front sticker, and acquire a modest buffer before the volume drops again. Because in the cereal aisle, what you pay for and what you carry out the door have officially severed ties. To understand how the modern retail supply chain reached this point of fragmentation, it is necessary to examine the geographic and economic traps built into industrial agriculture. Grocery distribution in 2026 does not fail because of single isolated events. It fails because long-term policy decisions, international trade dependencies, and structural logistics vulnerabilities have finally converged on the retail shelf. Walmart, operating as the largest grocery retailer in the United States, functions as a hyper-efficient mirror of these global pressures. When a category contracts at a Walmart distribution center, it represents a deep-seated crisis within the production pipeline itself. Consider number 11 on the list, canned tropical fruit. For decades, products like canned pineapple, mandarin oranges, and fruit cocktail were treated as permanent fixtures of the center store aisles. They were cheap, shelf-stable, and entirely predictable. However, the geographic realities behind these products have turned them into logistical liabilities. Tropical fruit processing relies heavily on specialized agrarian hubs in Southeast Asia, particularly Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Over the past 24 months, these regions have faced volatile weather patterns that disrupted harvest yields, but the primary bottleneck is the physical container trade. Every single can requires aluminum, a commodity that has seen sharp cost increases due to smelting energy constraints and shifting trade tariffs. When you add trans-Pacific freight rates, port processing fees, and domestic trucking costs to a low-margin item, the mathematical model breaks down. Retailers like Walmart do not absorb these cost increases indefinitely. Instead, they practice retail contraction. They systematically drop mid-tier brands and larger, budget-friendly sizes from the active ordering system. By narrowing the consumer's choices down to either the high-margin premium brand or the expensive name brand option, the retailer forces a quiet financial adjustment without ever having to post a shortage sign. This exact corporate triage is actively hollowing out number 10, frozen vegetables. The frozen food section has traditionally been the consumer's ultimate shield against inflation in the fresh produce department. When fresh broccoli or green beans spike in price, the freezer case offers a stable, long-lasting alternative. That shield is now cracking. The production of frozen vegetables is tightly bound to domestic agricultural hubs like California's Central Valley and major growing regions in Florida and the Pacific Northwest. According to data from the United States Department of Agriculture, fresh vegetable production costs have escalated by 7 to 8% heading into 2026, driven by rising agricultural labor wages, water allocation fees, and diesel fuel costs. Because frozen vegetables draw from these exact same fields, processors are facing identical upward cost pressures. The industrial freezing process is incredibly energy-intensive, requiring continuous uninterrupted cold chains from the moment of harvest to the regional distribution warehouse. Faced with soaring cold storage electricity rates and transportation overhead, processors have altered their output strategy. They are eliminating the large economical family-size bags, the very items that budget-conscious households rely on to stretch meals across a full calendar week. The physical freezer doors at the store still look fully stocked because employees spread the remaining inventory across the empty slots. But a meticulous count reveals that the actual variety of budget-friendly vegetable medleys has been cut down to a fraction of its former scale. The economic displacement then spills directly into number 9, peanut butter. Peanut butter occupies a unique psychological and economic position in the American diet. It is an ultra-efficient, dense source of shelf-stable protein. Historically, whenever macroeconomic pressures drive the price of fresh beef, pork and poultry past a certain threshold, consumer behavior shifts instantly. Millions of grocery carts across the nation simultaneously drift toward the peanut butter aisle as families seek a lower-cost alternative to keep their grocery budgets intact. Walmart's internal inventory tracking systems register this demand spike immediately, but the industrial peanut supply chain cannot scale up overnight. Peanut farming is highly concentrated in specific southern states, including Georgia, Alabama, and Texas, making the crop highly vulnerable to regional droughts and soil depletion. When domestic demand surges past a critical point, the existing crop yield is quickly spoken for, leaving regional processors unable to meet the replenishment orders generated by Walmart's automated software. The large multi-pound jars sell out first and fail to return to stock for weeks at a time, leaving only the smaller, less cost-effective containers on the shelves. This brings us to number 8, the quiet instability surrounding bananas and avocados. These two items represent a distinct geographic trap because they cannot be stored long-term in a warehouse. They operate on a razor-thin, just-in-time logistical timeline. Bananas move through rigid supply corridors originating in Costa Rica, Guatemala, and Colombia, while avocados remain heavily dependent on production zones in Mexico. Any structural disruption along these trade routes, whether it is an international border inspection slowdown, a fuel surcharge spike, or a regional labor strike, instantly breaks the continuity of supply. For decades, The price of a banana at Walmart remained one of the most reliable metrics in the entire economy, hovering at a predictable 54 to 58 cents per pound. It was treated as a loss leader to get shoppers through the door. But as ocean freight logistics grow more complex and climate volatility impacts the tropical growing belts, maintaining that artificially low price points has become impossible. Walmart has responded not by letting the shelves go bare, but by subtly reducing the physical footprint of the display. The mounds of fruit are shallower, the selection of perfectly ripe avocados is highly inconsistent, and the sizes are shrinking. The consumer is being trained to accept less availability, paying the same price for a smaller bunch of fruit, while the back-end automated ordering system quietly dials back the volume of incoming shipments to prevent costly spoilage in a high-risk category. Moving into the core of the grocery infrastructure reveals a deeper clash between global agricultural limits and corporate cost management. This is where we encounter the direct hollowing out of staple goods that families use as basic building blocks for daily meals. The automated procurement systems are not just filtering out minor varieties. They are actively choking off inventory in high-volume categories because the underlying wholesale economics have become completely unsustainable for a discount retailer. This structural reality is explicitly clear in number 7, olive oil. The crisis in the olive oil aisle is a direct consequence of a multi-year ecological bottleneck in the Mediterranean basin. Spain, Italy, and Greece collectively generate more than 70% of the global olive oil supply. According to international agricultural yield reports, these regions experienced back-to-back production cycles devastated by severe heat stress and prolonged historic drought. The global output plummeted to historic lows, causing wholesale commodity prices to surge dynamically by the arrival of 2026. Retail prices for standard extra virgin olive oil at domestic supermarkets had effectively doubled from their baseline historical averages. At Walmart locations, standard bottles that previously retailed for $6 to $8 now routinely command $12 to $18. Because this steep price hike exceeds what the typical value-conscious shopper is willing to absorb, sales volume has dropped sharply. Walmart's automated inventory matrix handles this drop by dropping the volatile mid-tier brands entirely. The corporate buyer team has quietly shifted ordering parameters to prioritize either small, high-margin premium bottles or low-cost substitute oil blends, effectively removing the dependable mid-price cooking staples from the consumer matrix. An identical pattern of category thinning is unfolding at number 6, canned tuna. Shelf-stable seafood has traditionally served as a highly resilient baseline protein for millions of households. However, the international supply chain driving canned tuna is facing severe regulatory and manufacturing pressure. The primary catch zones located across the Pacific and Indian Oceans are subject to tightening maritime quotas designed to prevent fishery collapses. Furthermore, the processing infrastructure is heavily centralized in Southeast Asian nations like Thailand, exposing the final product to volatile international shipping lane rates and changing import tariff policies. The domestic packaging process presents its own economic hurdles. The price of industrial-grade aluminum and tin-plate steel has remained elevated, adding fixed costs to every single unit produced. When global logistics expenses are superimposed onto a product designed to sell for under $2, the financial margins disappear completely. To protect corporate profit statements, retail buyers have altered their supplier fulfillment rules. Rather than maintaining a wide array of choices, the automated ordering queues have dropped several historical mid-range brands. The product shelf remains physically filled out by store employees who face 4 identical rows of the remaining house brand, but the underlying variety of affordable, high-protein options has contracted significantly. This structural volatility leads directly into the volatile reality of number 5, eggs. The domestic egg market remains one of the most unstable sectors within the entire food distribution system. Agricultural Department data confirms that the commercial poultry industry continues to struggle with recurring outbreaks of highly pathogenic avian influenza. When a commercial egg-laying facility detects a single case within its flock, biosecurity mandates require the immediate destruction of the entire bird population at that location to halt transmission. These emergency culls remove millions of productive laying hens from the supply chain within a 48-hour window. The process of repopulating a commercial laying facility and waiting for new flocks to reach peak production maturity takes months. During these supply deficits, demand remains completely static because consumers require eggs as a fundamental dietary component. This supply-demand imbalance drives sudden, massive spikes in wholesale spot market pricing. Because Walmart operates on fixed, high-volume vendor contracts, it cannot constantly adjust its share prices to match wild wholesale swings without alienating shoppers. Consequently, when regional supply drops below a critical line, fulfillment rates at regional distribution hubs plummet. The 18-count cartons and budget-friendly white eggs disappear from stock first, leaving shelves inconsistently populated by more expensive cage-free or organic options that do not fit the traditional budget shopper's parameters. The supply chain strain reaches its most critical point at number 4, ground beef. Ground beef is arguably the most important high-volume protein source in the domestic food economy, anchoring the weekly meal planning of tens of millions of households. The current inventory deficit is driven by a profound structural contraction of the domestic livestock sector. The National Cattle Inventory Report, issued by the United States Department of Agriculture, documented that the domestic beef cow herd has contracted to its lowest absolute level since 1961. This multi-year herd reduction was triggered by consecutive seasons of severe pasture drought across the American Southwest, forcing ranchers to liquidate breeding stock rather than pay unsustainable prices for supplemental winter feed. The biological reality of cattle production dictates that rebuilding a national herd requires years, as a heifer must be raised, bred, and deliver a calf that takes nearly 2 years to reach market weight. As a direct result of this long-term bottleneck, the total volume of domestic beef processing has dropped substantially. Logistics coordinators at major distribution centers report that order fulfillment rates for fresh ground beef shipments have consistently fallen well below targeted operational thresholds. When a regional distribution center requests 100 cases of ground beef to restock regional stores, suppliers are frequently only delivering 65 to 70 cases due to raw material scarcity. This structural shortage translates directly to the retail floor, where ground beef prices have moved toward historic highs, forcing the retail system to quietly ration available inventory by reducing ordering caps across thousands of store locations.